3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Chicago Wilderness Café. We're going to give it a few minutes to let everyone join us. Okay, good morning. Welcome to Chicago Wilderness Café, Urban Forest Inventory and Analysis. My name is Laura Riley. I'm the coordinator of Chicago Wilderness, and we're really pleased to have you here today. We're still letting a few folks in, but I wanted to let you know that we encourage you to keep yourself on mute and drop any of the questions in your chat. We will have some time for question and answer at the end of the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer your questions at that time. And we will also invite you to unmute yourself and ask questions at that time for conversation. I'm going to give it another minute and let folks join us, and then I'm going to turn it over to Shauna Shanning. Well, it looks like it's slowed, so I'm going to turn it over now. Welcome. Oh, I also want to mention thank you very much to the support of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Urban and Community Forestry Program, and the U.S. Forest Service for supporting this Chicago Wilderness Café. The funding supports workshops and training so that Chicago Wilderness can help more communities improve urban tree canopy and forests across the region, including through participation in Tree City USA. These institutions are equal opportunity providers. And thank you for the support.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here at this virtual cafe. My name is Shauna Shanning, and I am an ecologist with the U.S. Forest Service, and I work for a program called the Forest Inventory and Analysis, which sits within the Research and Development branch of the U.S. Forest Service. And as I talk about the program, I'll probably shorten it to FIA most of the time. The FIA program has been around for a long time, and some of you might be familiar with it. Just to get a sense of our audience, if you're willing to just shoot a thumbs up if you are familiar with FIA at all. Okay, there's a few, but they're not coming in fast and furious from what I can see on this end. Do a nice little introduction of FIA, and today we're going to talk primarily about the more recently implemented urban FIA program, and take a look at what data is collected, how you and others can get access to it, and what it can be used for. Also with us today is Alexis Ellis. She's a biological scientist with the MyTree program, which is partnered with the U.S. Forest Service and which provides the tools that the urban FIA program uses to quantify the benefits or the ecosystem services that urban trees provide. Alexis will talk some about just what those benefits are and how MyTree calculates them. And she'll also demonstrate a really user-friendly app called MyTree. The MyTree app is a great tool for learning and teaching about ecosystem services. And although it doesn't use FIA data, it can really help to better understand the kind of information that urban FIA program provides. And I just think it's also a really great tool for individuals, local organizations, or even like classroom groups to do some smaller scale studies of their own. After that, we have Rebecca Zender, a geosystems spatial manager with our partners Texas A&M Forest Service. And she'll demonstrate the MyCities Trees application, which pulls together the urban FIA data and the resulting MyTree model estimates to provide a really user-friendly and interactive way for the public to explore the ecosystem services that trees provide in cities like Chicago. And then once we've looked at the MyCities Trees app, I'll hop back in and I'm going to explore a slightly wider set of urban FIA data that reaches beyond the Chicago city limits and across the Chicago wilderness region. I'll show you where you can get the data to explore on your own in case you're good at data wrangling and want to do some additional digging. So at the end, we'll see how much time we have and either just do an open question and answer session, or if we have time, we'll move into some breakout rooms to have some more one-on-one time with the topic you're most interested in. But first, let's just talk a bit about the history of FIA, how it developed to include urban areas, and what kind of data the urban FIA program provides. So for anyone here who's not familiar with FIA, it's a program that has been in place now for over 90 years. It was originally created to track the health, growth, mortality, and change of forested lands across the nation. Initially, the program was only focused on areas that could provide commercial products like timber, but over time, as forest products, our use of forest products expanded and that forests provide, the program expands size and tree cover requirements. On those forested plots, the traditional FIA program collects data including stand characteristics such as forest type, stand age, size, and then for the trees on those plots, we identify species and take all kinds of measurements like diameter and height, record damages and diseases, look at crown health, that kind of thing. And then that data is also used in calculations to make broader estimations of volume and biomass, or even the amount of carbon stored by trees in our nation's forests. So looking at this map, which uses the Chicago region as an example, what we see here are all the traditional FIA plots that are forested and therefore have tree data collected from them. Across Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana, there's well over 8,000 of these research plots, and they provide a lot of really valuable information about forested lands. But I mean, you can see what's missing here, right? Any trees in areas that don't meet those strict FIA definitions of forested lands haven't been measured through this traditional FIA program. With more than 80% of the US population living in urban areas, though, those trees provide really important benefits. And we're learning more and more all the time about just how much trees and green space in urban areas matter. So recognizing the interest and the need for data about those trees and that green space in urban areas, in 2014, Congress expanded the FIA mission to provide that urban data. So now you can see all the urban FIA plots as well that have been completed within the Chicago region as of 2019. There's a smattering of the green forested plots on which urban FIA data was collected, and then all of those orange dots represent plots on areas that don't meet the FIA definition of forest land. Although the traditional program would not have collected any tree data from these plots, through the urban FIA data, tree data and other plot area characteristics were collected. So now these kinds of areas that we're collecting data from through the urban FIA program. And looking back to all that information that gets collected on the traditional FIA plots, in urban areas, we have an even broader set of interests and needs. And so for these plots, we've kept the baseline FIA data and added variables that we need to provide that urban specific data we're looking for. We record more detailed information about non-forest land uses and also collect information about the vegetation and surface cover, as well as invasive plants data. And then for each tree on the research plot, we collect information like whether the tree was planted or is growing naturally, whether it's in a maintained area like a mowed yard or boulevard, and whether the tree is growing near water or if it's in close proximity to a street. And then that data gets run through all of our traditional FIA models and those MyTree models that I mentioned earlier, and we end up with estimations of some of the more quantifiable ecosystem services that trees provide, and which Alexis will tell you more about very shortly. So the goals of the urban FIA program are to annually monitor all US Census defined urban areas across the US, and also to provide a strategic urban inventory for the cities with the largest populations. FIA is targeting cities with populations over 200,000, but in some cases there are cities that are smaller than that included, just to ensure that every state has a city represented in the program. It'll take some time for the program to get fully ramped up, but so far data is being collected in 44 cities and across 28 states, and 10 cities have a complete set of data, including Chicago. Also, as of 2022, all of those dark gray states in the Northeast, anytime one of those randomly selected traditional FIA plots lands within an urban area, anywhere in those states, an urban FIA plot will be installed, and all of those area characteristics and tree data will be collected, whether the plot is forest or non-forest. So currently, these 10 cities have a complete set of data collected from within the city limits. And there's also additional data from adjacent urban areas to those cities available as well. And all these data are published and available to the public. Chicago's urban FIA measurements began in 2016 with a subset of all the plots measured each year through 2019, when the first full set, or the first full cycle, we often say, of data was completed. And then in 2020, plots began to be revisited again, and each year another small group of those plots will get remeasured until we have, excuse me, another complete set of remeasurement data at the end of 2026. So this system of annually revisiting a subset of the research plots means that rather than creating just a one-time snapshot of urban areas, that data will be continuously refreshed, so we'll be able to study the changes occurring. For now, to get us a more complete picture of what MyTree does and how the data we collect in urban FIA feeds into those MyTree ecosystem services models, I'm going to pass it off to Alexis.
All right. Thank you very much for having me today. It's really exciting to talk to you all. So I'm going to introduce you to MyTree, and this is one of our simplest tools. And as Shauna said, it's going to estimate the ecosystem services in your urban environment. So before I start with a demo, I'm just going to give you an idea of iTree and the ecosystem services that this tool is going to explore. So iTree was developed in 2006. And there was an abundance of data out there and research put into looking at the tree benefits associated with urban forests. And so we wanted to put this all together into a single tool to really help people assess their urban forests and help them better manage it. So this started with iTree Eco. It's evolved into several additional tools. It's free software. It's all based on peer-reviewed research, and we provide free technical support. And over time, the tools have evolved to meet the needs of the users, as well as to enhance them with any new science that's come along. So we currently have over 620,000 users globally, and we support all of them in whatever way we can. So what iTree does is it demonstrates tree value. So you start with the structure of a tree. As a user, you could provide us with species and DBH. From that, we have an extensive database where we estimate other values associated with that tree, the leaf area, the height, the crown area, elements like that. From that, we can derive the function. What is that tree doing for you? Is it reducing stormwater runoff? Is it improving air quality, energy savings, things like that? And then finally, we put a value on that. So we can give a monetary value, which is going to allow you to promote conserving and maintaining these trees. So as I said, we're looking at, it's a tree benefits-based approach. So we're starting with our structure, our function, our value. From that, you can come up with strategic management plans. You can encourage policy making to promote these benefits. The tools then have some tree cover change analysis options. So we can see if we don't touch our urban forest, where are we losing our benefits? What do we need to do in order to maintain the value of our urban forest? So we adjust our plans. We maybe put more money into maintenance. We might do some planting on certain areas of your community where they need additional information. And then the cyclical scenario comes around where we then again reevaluate the structure. So this is kind of what the iTree tools allow you to do on a large scale. So these benefits, what do we estimate and why? So the iTree suite of tools, there are an abundance of benefits that they do estimate, but MyTree being a very simple tool intended for more community-based audiences, we look at carbon dioxide, storage and sequestration. We look at energy impacts. So that's the tree building interaction. How are you saving money on energy by planting trees around your home? We look at the stormwater reduction, runoff, rainfall interception, and our air quality benefits, pollution removal and avoided pollutants into the atmosphere. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about each of these right now and how we provide those values. So as we know, trees are largely made up of carbon. Their leaves, their trunks, their roots, branches, all of this is made out of carbon. So based on your species and your size of your tree, we estimate the biomass of that tree. And that allows us to determine how much carbon, to estimate how much carbon is being stored in that tree. Then based on your location and also the growth rate for that species, we can estimate how much that tree is going to grow annually. As the tree grows, it's going to pull more carbon into itself from the atmosphere. And that's where we get our carbon sequestration from. Additionally, in terms of the energy savings, you're putting less carbon into the atmosphere. So that's kind of another benefit of the trees with regards to carbon storage. And then, so you can see here, this is just an example of the MyTree report. And you can see here, we will provide you with information about how much carbon dioxide is sequestered by that tree, as well as the monetary value. And then down below, we estimate how much carbon has been stored to date. So based on the species and the size of that tree, approximately how old that tree is, And so we can actually estimate how much carbon that tree has stored over its lifespan to date. So the next element is our energy effects. So planting trees around your home is going to benefit you from an energy saving standpoint. So in the summer, depending on where the trees are planted, you're going to get shading. That's going to save you an energy cost to cool your home. Trees also provide transpirational cooling, so they're going to cool the air around them. That's another benefit. So from that, you're going to see your electricity savings. Your electricity bill is potentially going to go down based on that shading and climatic indices. Additionally, in the winter, trees can provide windbreak depending on where they're planted around your home. This can save you money on fuels to heat your home. I will note that there is sometimes a negative effect because you're shading the home. You might have an increase on that level, but typically your energy savings in the summer are going to outweigh that negative impact on your home. And then finally, in terms of the energy effect, obviously, if we reduce our energy use, that's going to lessen the energy production demand. And that, therefore, is going to, those emissions that were coming out of the power generation sources are also going to get reduced. You're going to see your avoided energy emissions coming from the energy savings indirectly through planting trees around your home. Then we have our stormwater effects. So leaves and branch surfaces will intercept and store rainfall, and that's going to reduce the runoff that's coming off of them. Additionally, the roots are going to increase the rate at which the rainfall infiltrates the soil, and also thus increasing the capacity of the soil to store water. So depending on the species and the size of your trees, you can see that's going to determine the leaf area, and you're going to see a reduction in those intense flood events because there's more runoff storage potential coming from the trees around you. And again, we put a monetary value on this based on national analysis results. And then finally, we have our air quality effects as well as the human health impacts. So leaves absorb pollutants. So ozone, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and carbon monoxide are kind of the main pollutants that the leaves really are effective in reducing in the atmosphere. They also intercept particulate matter. So those particles in the air are suspended on the leaves. And as well, the reduction in energy pollution. And finally, they reduce volatile organic compounds in the atmosphere. So we analyze this using local information, so city-specific information about your wind, your rain, your temperature, as well as information about your local leaf area, your local forest. And from that, we can determine how much air pollution is removed each year based on that specific tree or that forest that you've analyzed. Now, how do we put a monetary value on that? That's a little more kind of complex. So what we've decided is we actually estimate health impacts and values due to tree and shrub effects on air quality based on pollutant concentration reduction. So what we do is we look at these health effects. So we look at respiratory symptoms, hospital admissions, mortality rates, and each of these pollutants cause these negative adverse health effects at different rates. So in doing so, by reducing that pollution, they're also going to reduce the monetary value is associated with the reduction in pollutions. So that's how we apply the monetary value to pollutions for energy emissions as well as the air pollution removal. So we have a set of core tools. We have 5 tools, and really they're all, the underlying science is the same for all of them, but which tool do I use? It really depends on the scale of your analysis area, whether you're looking at a city or a single tree, the amount of effort you have to put into this. Maybe you just are doing this one afternoon, or maybe you've really got a citywide initiative to analyze your trees. And then the objective, what are you trying to get across to people? So as I said, this is MyTree, and this is our very simple tool. And it's set up to use on a cell phone. I guess it's called an app, but really you don't need to download it. It's just a website. You can run it on your computer as well. So what MyTree does is we're just going to get started. I will put in, they're going to ask you for your location. And as I said, location is important in determining how the trees are growing and the environment around them in terms of pollution monitor data, temperature patterns, things like that. So 411 South Wells, I think that is around where the Chicago Wilderness office is. So we've got our location set. Now it's going to ask us for species. We have an extensive species database with over 9,000 species in it. But if you don't know exactly what your species is, you can type in something as simple as red maple, and it's going to apply that to your analysis. You could also just say maple. It's still going to have, we still have the information down to that simple level. So then it's going to ask you for your tree condition. And this is really important because obviously an excellent condition tree is going to have far better, more benefits than a dying tree. You know, there's more leaf area, it's larger, it's healthier, its root system is more complete. So you really have to provide that information. So we'll just assume it's a good tree. This is a fictitious tree, obviously. And then we have our trunk size. So you can enter diameter or circumference. So the diameter at breast height, you can really just estimate, you know, put your hands out, get a good idea. So we'll just assume it's a 12-inch trunk size tree. And then our sun exposure. That's also important because a full sun, a tree in full sun is going to have more room to grow and thus greater ecosystem services. So we'll say it's a full sun tree, assuming it's in the downtown Chicago area. And then finally, for that energy analysis, is this tree within 60 feet of a building? So we'll say yes, so that we can provide those energy benefits. And then there are really three simple questions. What's the building vintage? This is, you know, going to give us an idea of what the materials are, the level of insulation, and that's going to impact obviously those energy savings values. So we'll say built after 1980. How far is it from the building? Also impacting this analysis. So we'll say middle of the road. And then what's the compass direction from the tree to the nearest building? So we'll just say it's southwest. So those are kind of the basic fields. You can provide some additional information. You can name your tree. You can tell us whether it's just a potential planting or and this is really for your information. So when you create a project and you save it or you share it, this can provide some additional information to the people that you want to share it with, or just as you go back to your project. So at this point, we have the option, we can either add more trees or we can just get the results for this single tree. So we have the option of going in, adding another tree. We can edit the tree's information if we realize we made an error. But at this point, we're just going to look at this single red maple. So we have the option, we can see the ecosystem services for this year, but we also have the ability to forecast this 20 years into the future. So that way we can see the benefits over 20 years. What is this tree going to do for me over the next 20 years? So this tree is expected to give us over $800 in benefits. That's the combination of all those ecosystem services I mentioned before. So we have our carbon sequestration, and that's $104 in carbon sequestration alone. These are based on national averages for the monetary value of carbon. We also have our stormwater mitigation. So it's expected to, you know, avoided runoff of over 4,000 gallons of runoff and 13,000 gallons of rainfall interception. We then have our air pollution removal. So how much pollution is that of these main pollutants is that tree going to remove from the atmosphere, as well as the dollar value based on those health metrics. And then finally, the energy use. So this tree could save you personally $390 in energy savings and costs. And as you can see, you've got significant electricity savings as well as some heating and fuel savings. And as I noted before, we then have the avoided emissions. So this is what, by saving this electricity, we're not the power plants aren't putting those pollutants back into the atmosphere. So this is just a brief example of what you can do with this. And the great thing with this is you can share it with friends. You can save a project and maybe come back and edit things as maybe a tree, you know, the is the condition is deteriorated, or maybe some of it was removed. You can add a number of trees, so you can have all the trees in your neighborhood mapped. And it's a great way to share with people, what are these trees doing for me? What are they doing for my community? Just a really great tool for having an understanding of tree benefits in general. So that's a brief introduction to MyTree. As we said, there are a number of tools. This is the simplest. A lot of them, the others get into additional information about those tree benefits, as well as the structure of the forest. We have a really wonderful website, itreetools.org. It has videos, documentation, curriculum. We have an annual newsletter, a monthly newsletter that comes out. And then we also have an extensive list of reports from around the US as well as around the globe, hundreds of reports that give you examples of what other communities have done using these tools to promote tree planting efforts in their communities. So thank you very much. I know that was very quick, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions, or visit our website. And we have a wonderful support staff, the info@itreetools.org, that are happy to answer any of your questions that you may have about the tools. So thank you very much.
So I think that means I'm up. I am Rebecca Zinder. I work for Texas A&M Forest Service as our geospatial services manager. And we partner heavily with the U.S. Forest Service on a number of projects, but in particular, what we're talking about today, the My Cities Trees application, which I'm going to give you a quick overview of. And this application functions to provide all of the urban forest inventory and analysis data that is collected for all of the cities that are participating in the program across the nation in an easy to use and hopefully user-friendly manner. And if you have feedback on that, we always welcome it. But just a quick overview of the purpose of the application. As I said, it gives access to all the data. You can also see status information for the cities. So I have here as an example the pop-up for Chicago. You can see, as Shauna said, data collection began in 2016. That cycle was completed in 2019, and we put the data into My Cities Trees in 2021. One of the main benefits of My Cities Trees and how it adds value to the urban FIA data, other than making it accessible, is the use of spatial themes to break down those estimates. So here you can see land cover in Chicago. We have a few other themes, which I'll show you in a moment. And these can they're usually 4 or 5 per city. And they can vary from city to city to reflect local resource issues. Then we get into the meat of the data and we show statistics for those urban forest estimates. And we also let you produce reports for custom areas and selections. So here's an example of that inventory statistics window with whatever classes you had selected within your spatial theme that you're looking at. So it just gives you, here we see count. There are several other categories as well that you can look at. If you want to go a little bit deeper, we have more detailed statistics by species and ownership, diameter, class, or land use. And here you see those stats broken out by species and private versus public ownership. This is an example of the one-page short summary that you can produce in the app. It will show whatever you have currently selected. So whatever stat you're looking at, whatever area you're looking at, and just provide a brief summary of that information. We also have the capability of producing a more in-depth report. This is a multi-page PDF. I have just a sample of the pages shown here. And I will show you that a little bit better in a second too. So I always say the best way to actually learn about the website is to go to it. And so that's what we're going to do now. When you first enter, to minimize the videos that are on top of it, you get this splash page, which gives you an overview of the application, kind of the information that I just gave you, with also some general information about the Urban FIA program and partnership between U.S. Forest Service and Texas A&M Forest Service. And we'll point out up here at the top, there are some buttons. If you click support, there is a document that gives an introduction to the application. It goes through an example. So that's a good place to start if you're feeling a little bit lost. And you can also subscribe to get updates of the data there. Anytime we make an update, you get an email. And those, I mean, it's not like we're flooding your inbox, but when we do add new data, we'll send out an email. So then when you're ready to start, you click open application, either up at the top or right there where I clicked it. And it loads the website. You're first presented with this map of all the participating cities. You notice that some are red, some are gray. The ones that are red have data in the application ready to go, ready to look at. So here's Chicago. Again, this is that pop-up we already looked at. If you want to go ahead and get started, you can click select the city. You can also select a city from this drop-down list over here. But so now we have Chicago selected. We can look at the stats. We first get this, when you first select a city, you get this kind of overview information over here, the size of the sampled area, the number of people who live there, the number of plots that data was collected on. And then if you open the inventory stats, you can see count. We could look at carbon. We can look at energy savings like Alexis was talking about. So $1.8 million per year is saved in Chicago due to trees. So that's just a quick example of those things. I encourage you to go in and explore them yourselves. Then you can select a theme to look at. So I'm going to pick population density, and you'll see it populates on the map. Colors, but we don't know what they mean yet. If you click the eye, you get some information about the different themes and where they're coming from. To get into what the classes are, expand the classes section, and now you can see what those different colors mean. So gray, not very many people, up to blue is a lot of people. Now, if we play with those, say we want to know how many trees there are just where the most people live, we can do that. You turn off the classes, it updates on the map. So those, now we just see those two top classes on here. This overview information updated to show us the total Chicago versus just the area we're looking at now. And the inventory stats updated. So we can see that 14% of the trees occur in this more densely populated area, whereas 74% of the people live in that more densely populated area. If you want to print a summary or generate a report, you can do those. You just click on the button, get your map where you want it to be displayed, and then hit the check mark. I already did it so that we wouldn't have to wait. It does take a second to run. But here's again that summary. And here is a report. And it just takes you through kind of the background information about what the data is that you're looking at. And then the map that shows the classes that you selected. So if I had run the report with just the green and the blue, we would just be seeing the green and the blue on here. And then some kind of general information. And then it goes through all of those statistics that we looked at in the inventory stats window. So you've got count, you've got volume, you've got carbon, and so on, all the way down here. to the last section, which is savings due to avoided health effects. And then we have a couple more tables at the end to show you just the stats by diameter class and by land use. And then a list of all of the species rounds out the report. And these are the species that were actually observed on the plots in the selection. So right now we're looking at the whole city. So there were 48 species observed across the city. If you were just looking at a subset of the classes for the theme, so again, just those two most highly populated areas, this number would change and the list would change to reflect just the species that were observed in that area. Now I think we are running up on time, so I'm going to turn it back over to Shauna to share a little bit more. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Rebecca. Okay. So let me make sure that is sharing properly. Should be. Nope, I didn't hit the share button yet. Okay, let's try that again. Rebecca, will you give me a thumbs up if that's sharing my screen? Okay, thanks. Okay, so Rebecca just walked us through a really great way to explore the ecosystem services and tree population estimates and land cover data from within the city limits of Chicago and the other cities which have a full data set. And that tool provides a really great way to access the data for a lot of users, and those automated reports it generates are also really useful. Since I know we have a lot of science-minded people here who may have a fair amount of experience working with large data sets and have an understanding of databases, I wanted to show you also how to access the raw urban FIA data and demonstrate just a few of the variables available there that you won't be able to find on MyCitiesTrees, on the MyCitiesTrees app. So first of all, if you're looking for more information about urban FIA, this is the website where you can find it. And just a really unfortunate warning is that we've had a really sudden shift in our URL. And so the search engines really haven't caught up yet. And so this document will be available for you. And you know, if you're trying to find this, you might find that it's just easier to come to the links that we provided. And so you can click to find the data and tools. You can click on that FIA data and tools down there at the bottom. And that will bring you here to this page. And you can see that we have a link to MyCitiesTrees, the MyCitiesTrees app here. But for now, in this piece, we'll just use the data found in the Urban Data Mart. So once you click on that, you'll be brought to this page. And sort of like in the MyCitiesTrees app, you see all the participating cities, and the purple stars represent the cities that have data available. And then the orange stars are all the participating cities which will have data available within the next few years. Although you can scroll through here and look at the participating cities and get some basic information, when you hit these urban CSV zip file or urban SQLite file buttons, you're actually going to get all the data from all the cities, regardless of what city you are you've picked there. So currently, like I said, the urban zip files download includes data from all 10 cities in these relational tables and reference files. And once you have these files, then it's up to you, whatever tool you prefer to use for data analysis. It's really important to understand that this is really different than the kinds of numbers that we saw using MyCitiesTrees app. That application, in most cases, uses the data only from within the city limits and it does calculations to make citywide population level estimates. It shows numbers like how many trees are estimated to be in the city, or how much pollution trees remove from the air citywide. The data we just downloaded is raw data. It's diameters, heights, actual seedling counts, and then some of the calculations for energy saved from an individual tree on an individual structure are in there as well. So that's really different than those population estimates and that we would typically use in our reporting, but it still provides really useful, powerful, and interesting information that can help lead to questions to dig into even more. So once we have those tables and we're using our analysis tools, we can start to dig into things like this. What single species has been planted in every one of these cities? And I am gonna open it up right now and just see if anybody is willing to unmute and take a guess at which tree has been planted in every one of these cities. Just a second. All right.
Laura Dirks dropped into the
So-
chat. London Plain.
Oh,
London Plain.
oh, London Plain, good guess. Yeah, I should have been thinking to watch the chat there. Any other guesses in the chat?
Freeman Maple.
Oh, another man. Yeah, we have people that know their trees. Another really good guess. I bet the next guess would be it. Calorie pear.
Wow.
So that is one that was discovered on every plot from the East Coast to the West Coast, from Texas to Illinois. Something else you can do is something like this. Here we have a map with all the participating cities, and these pie charts, their size represents the total basal area of the sample. And then the colors are broken out into which trees were planted in blue, which were not planted in orange, and which ones we're not sure of, which is the pink. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell. And so we can see, for example, that about half the trees in the Chicago wilderness region that were sampled on this randomized study were naturally occurring trees, natural regeneration. Whereas, I mean, compare that down here to San Diego, and we've got, it looks like maybe almost 90% of those trees are planted. And so there's all sorts of questions that we can dig into there about where those trees are planted, why cities might vary between them, and that kind of thing. If we're interested in planted trees, we can filter that down, and we can look just at the planted trees and compare between cities. And so here, what we're looking at is a faceted figure showing the diameter size distribution of sampled trees from each of the 10 cities. For each city, on the far left are the saplings. These are the 1 to 5 inch trees. You can see down here are the size classes. So all of these are the saplings. And the saplings, of course, are in general the most recently planted. They have had the least amount of time to grow and potentially have not quite yet got established. Their survival might still be more dependent on careful watering. So their long-term survival may not be quite as certain as trees in some of those larger categories. The next size class over is the trees from 5 to 11 inches, and then 11 to 30, and then 30 inches and above. And this higher, this 30 plus category might be categorized or classified as heritage trees. And those are the trees that have been around for a long time. On the one hand, we know that these trees are well established and they've made it in their location for a long time. And they're likely providing a lot of benefits through their large crown and their large leaf area. but they also might be starting to decline as well. Something else to consider. We can see that for most of the cities, the majority of the planted trees are in that smaller 1 to 5 inch category. They're saplings. But then for Chicago here and Kansas City, we can see the majority of the measured planted trees were in that next stand size, that size class up of 5 to 11 inches. Where many of the cities have 40 to 60% of their planted trees in that smallest size category, only about 20% of Chicago region's planted trees that were sampled are saplings. So now, of course, every city is a different size and has a different number of planted trees. So it's entirely possible that this 20% in Chicago is still way more than this, 58% in Austin. But it begins to make you wonder about why these differences exist. So if we narrow down and we look just at the urban FIA plots in the Chicago region, this in blue, we kind of saw this before with them color coded by status, but this in blue is all the urban FIA plots that have been measured up until 2019. And again, what data tool you use is up to you, but I've been using Tableau, which I just find a really easy tool for exploration. Here I've put together just a really simple dashboard from which we can begin to look into the Chicago data a little more closely. So I'll just walk you through what we're looking at here. On the upper left, we've got all the tree species that were measured, listed by common name and ranked. Of course, it's going to refresh. Ranked right now from the highest count to the lowest count. And these colors represent whether or not the trees were planted, which is in blue. So the planted trees are in blue. Naturally occurring, natural regen is in orange. And then if we didn't know, that's in pink. So these pink common buckthorn were probably in someone's yard and difficult to tell if they had been planted there on purpose. And of course, we can see that the most common tree in the Chicago region is common buckthorn, which may not be a surprise to many of you. On the bottom left, we can see the breakdown of each species across the diameter size classes that we were looking at earlier. And in this figure, in this table, the planted status isn't represented. And then on the right here, we're looking at what % of sampled trees fell in each of the defined land uses. On the far left here, we have that FIA defined forest land. So we see over 50% of the measured trees, a lot of which were buckthorn, were found in that official, that FIA defined forest land. And then to the right, these are all the non-forest land uses, including agriculture. Here we've got commercial and industrial. This is residential or single family residential. So like single family homes. And then right here we have multifamily homes like apartment buildings, recreation, cemetery, rights of way, and other non-forest uses. And then these are broken down by planted status as well. And we were digging into planted trees. So let's just get rid of the natural trees and the ones we're not sure about. And we'll narrow it down to just looking at the planted trees. So when I do that, when we were looking only at planted trees, we can now see that Norway maple and silver maple are the top 2 most prevalent species of the planted trees sampled. And we can also, if we look down here, we can see that most of those were in that 11 to 30 inch size category. And over here, we can see actually that more than over 40% of the planted trees measured were on single family residential land, which is typically privately owned. And then another, this actually flashes up the numbers here, another 38% of planted trees were on right-of-ways, which are almost always publicly owned. So thinking back to that figure, comparing across, oh, we're getting low on time. So that was my big tease about all the things that you can do with the data. We can filter here by these 5-inch trees. And just one example, we see green ash, for example. Green ash used to make up a lot of the planted trees. Well, we can certainly understand why people are not planting green ash anymore. Scots pine is also a species that isn't recommended in the area. People used to plant it, and it looks like people aren't planting that species anymore. So now I've got you intrigued, but as you can see, just looking at a few of the variables available, you can really start digging into a lot of information and getting a good sense of how to answer some questions and how to find more information about the trees in the region. Again, we used 4 of these. We used common name, we used planted, we used diameter, and land use. And there's all these options here of what to dig into. So if you're data savvy, willing to do some work to understand the structure of those relational tables, you'll have access to an incredible amount of data. And by pulling just from a few areas, you can learn a lot about and find more questions to ask. Just a real quick summary from today about the tools you have available. There's the MyTree app. Really great for learning, teaching, and doing your own investigation about the trees near you. There's the My Cities Trees app, which allows you to learn about population level estimates of trees and the ecosystem services they provide in Chicago and other cities across the US. And then there's the raw data, which you can download and use for your own studies to look at additional aspects like what trees are planted or their proximity, if they are within proximity to a river or street. You can dig into whatever interests you using that raw data. More and more urban FIA data will become available from across the state and across the entire country. It'll be a really valuable tool for understanding how we are impacting the health and status of the trees in our urban areas and how those trees in our urban areas are impacting us. So I will ask now. We won't have time for breakout session. We might have time for a question or two before we go.
There's a few questions in the
Always
chat.
yeah,
No, there's a question from Laura Dirks. Is there information on the carbon sequestration? Laura, do you want to follow up with?
Alexis is
Specific to the Scotch pine?
Oh, no, somebody just
Oh,
asked, did you say
yeah.
Dutch pine? And I just said, no, Scotch pine. So,
Oh. Now, of course, we're getting delay. I saw Alexis, I think, responding to carbon, but she was muted.
Sorry, Alexis, you need to unmute yourself. Oh, let's see if I can do that for her. There we go. There we go.
Oh, I don't know if that worked. So if Laura, if you're asking about how we calculate carbon sequestration, so we have a group of species-specific allometric equations that we use to calculate the carbon storage of a tree. We then, based on your location, your current DBH, and species, we determine how quickly that tree is going to grow. So we grow it out over a year. We grow the diameter, the height, everything about it out over a year. We then, for the following year, calculate the carbon storage for that year. And subtracting those two, next year minus this year, gives us how much carbon it's going to sequester over that year. Does that make sense?
yeah, I was just wondering if you use these estimates in terms of urban planning, you know, if any kind of development was going to happen where they were going to take out a certain amount of trees, or do you see any cities using this as a tool to estimate what the impact will be on either growing a canopy or needing to take away from it?
Absolutely. We have a lot of, you know, there are eco projects, larger scale projects that have been run all over the country, all over the world. And a lot of them, that is the intent, is to, deter those large scale cuttings in order to make sure that that carbon is sequestered. And obviously, as we know, if we cut down the trees, we're releasing all that carbon back into the atmosphere. So yes, it's widely used for that reason.
And could you just tell me when you cut a tree down, the carbon that's sequestered what is the current estimate of the cutting down of a tree like that? Is it like 50% of the value, that everything that wasn't stored? I'm just curious, somebody cut down 150-year-old ash on a street right now. I mean, it was gigantic yesterday. And I was just curious.
So how much of it is released back into the atmosphere? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, is it 100% or?
So, I mean, I guess it depends.
Depends
on
what they do with it.
Way they do with it. Thank you.
If they
Yeah.
mulch it?
Then, yeah, I mean, then a large portion of it is getting released back into the atmosphere. Yeah.
That's
It
one
would
of the
be
things
better-
about,
It would be better if you just went and dumped all those trunks into a large forest to have it deteriorate over time.
well, and one of the focuses today in urban forestry and other forestry is the use of wood for construction. Again, a focus on that in order to basically then we're locking up that carbon for long-term use. And some cities will, I believe, end up using this urban FIA data to get a better understanding of their wood resources, those heritage trees like we talked about that may have other uses that can be used for products, artistic tables, or even lumber, in order to really kind of tie that carbon up for many, many, many years to come. So again, yeah, it makes a big difference how that wood is used after it's cut. That's a great question, though.
Charlie has a question here.
Well, I just wanted to comment, the Illinois Arborist Association actually is working with setting up a sawmill program so that way some of these trees can actually be put in, as was mentioned before, into lumber and processed into mulch, which is already going on. So some of this is happening, and by lead qualification for buildings, we've actually had some success on that. So it's a process. We are developing to get a sawmill association in Illinois. There's one in Wisconsin that we're working with. So I think that is a potential to make sure that we do not put the carbon back in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we do in MyTree Eco, we do look at decomposition and how the carbon is getting put back into the atmosphere, as well as we do look at harvesting techniques and what kind of the differences between them and how they impact carbon.
I see Cherie has a hand up.
Thanks.
Hey.
I wanted to add on to what Charlie said and let everyone know that there's a new Urban Wood Network chapter in Illinois that started earlier this year that's looking at urban wood reuse and putting together all the pieces of the pipeline, from tree assessment people, tree takedown people, and then the various uses that wood can be used for, and then connecting the users into that pipeline.
I just sent Charlie a separate message saying I think that would be an excellent topic for a follow-up cafe. I'd love to host that.
Sounds great.
We're up and coming.
We do have another tool related to that called the Urban Wood Marketplace. And it's not widely used, but it's available. And it allows you to post your, large whatever stumps or large tree cross sections. And it kind of tries to connect people that may be looking for large pieces of wood. It's wood.itreetools.org, but it's an interesting little tool.
Yeah, and Laura, that ash is going to be tricky because emerald ash borer and restrictions and the danger of spreading it when using ash. So sadly, in situations like that, sometimes it gets really difficult. Oops.
Thank you for dropping that in there, Alexis. Any other questions? Anyone?
And Laura, I apologize. I was going to show that last slide that we had. There it is.
No problem. Oh, yeah, no problem. Well, I guess it led right into that. We love to host these cafes to continue these conversations. If you have ideas or suggestions for future cafes, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to work with you to host and create it. We have a template to make it easy to do so, or invite partners to come together and share their collaborative success stories and discuss challenging issues across the region. So thank you very much to our great presenters today. I really appreciate their time, and this was a really interesting topic. I will be sending out a PDF of the slides that has links to the relevant information that they talked about today. And we'll also share a recording of today's webinar for those who are interested, and it will be posted on our website. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for coming, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.